We know that quality instruction in the classroom often begins with quality lesson plans. So I'm very excited to be able to bring you Nick tonight. So Nick, with that, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and good evening, everyone. I hope you had some dinner under your belt at this point. Maybe not, but I'm going to be here for 1 hour. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and I was a teacher. I worked in a couple state departments, the last time in the Maryland State Department of Education, and I started my business, LearningFRONT, in the 90s, and it's all about creating new and better ways of teaching. So I'm going to share my screen and jump into our agenda. And 1 second. And I hope everyone can see that now. That's me, and this is all about creating in-person, virtual, and blended lessons for adult basic education. I love this stuff. I've been doing it for a long time, and so I hope we have some folks out there passionate about effective instruction and lesson planning, and we'll have some fun together tonight. This is real time, so I'm going to use the chat as we do this to help me learn what you're thinking about as we go through and your suggestions. There are 3 things really outcomes from tonight. One is to see how we can align the CCRS standards with learning and assessment activities for 3 types of lesson plans, how we can customize a virtual professional learning platform for adult basic education, and take a look at how the process can reverse declining test scores and improve teaching and learning. Okay. Also, after that, I want to kind of just share some ideas for how instructors can share lesson plans and results in a virtual professional learning community. I'm going to use LearningFRONT, the professional learning community of my business, but many of the things I'm doing can be accomplished in other digital learning systems. You just do it differently and so forth. So I'm here to share ideas about effective teaching and learning. I want to just spend a couple minutes on my working definitions of those terms. So in-person learning, we're talking about in a physical classroom, face-to-face. And I'm actually going to a meeting tomorrow. It's going to be my first face-to-face meeting in about a year and a half. And so it'll be nice to get back into that context. Virtual learning, I'm talking about what we're doing right now is virtual learning. You can do it by yourself. You could do it through Zoom, and you can do it with a coach per se. And there's some variations of that evolving as a result of the pandemic. Some folks like to get into hybrid and remote and so forth. So I'll recognize those differences, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them tonight. And then finally, blended learning, and that's when we put the 2 together, the in-person and virtual options. And this is getting really exciting these days. And I see it as a time for us to make some big changes in what we do in the teaching learning world. So those are the 3 terms, and they set the definitions of what I'll be demonstrating. So we're in the welcoming. I'm going to do a demo. It's going to be a real-time demo. During that demo, feel free in the chat to say, hey, Nick, stop, maybe take a look at that again. Or say, hey, Nick, I got an idea. This is a better way to do it for adult. Most of the platform I'm going to show you has grown up with K-12 world, especially in urban schools in Baltimore, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and also in teacher education. So then we'll do some sharing at the end, and I'll give you some options for follow-up tonight, and we'll adjourn by 7. So let's get started by first taking a look at college and career ready standards-based teaching and learning. This is the context for the demo. I'm going to show what I call a dynamic lesson plan, and the content I'm going to show is how to use standards. It answers that question, what content or skills will each student learn? I use the word each rather than a group of folks. You really want to get to individual accountability. Performances, what will the student do or perform to demonstrate the standard? What's the real world context, the authentic context for learning the standard? Learning strategies, how will they actually learn it? And this is where I'll show the 3 variations. I think the first 3 can be pretty much the same, but it can be delivered differently than from a learning strategy point of view. How will you score the results of these lessons? And how will you take a look at the results to make improvements, not only in student learning, but also teacher performance. And this is a thing that I've learned in working with low performing schools that really makes the difference when a teacher can look at their own results in a personal way and make changes. I'll also, time permitting, take a look at some things called SMART skills, preferences, benchmarking, and metacognition, where you get into the students' attitudes and minds about your lessons. And we'll see if we can get to that. But here's again how it works. So I'm looking at planning tonight. And then what I demo tonight would be taught both online or in classroom, blended, or using any of the definitions I mentioned. Then to check the results and to act on the data that come out of the results. And I promote a kind of an incremental way of doing this so that you periodically look at lessons very comprehensively to see how it's going. And whoops, I want to go back here. Sorry about that. And last part is collaboration. The virtual professional learning communities allow us to collaborate throughout these four key movements. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen. And we can see that I can see the chat now. Thanks for being here, everyone. And now I'm going to share the demo. Okay, this is LearningFRONT. And as a member, I'm going to be playing the role of Sally Stone. She's a fictitious member of the community. When you log in, this is her homepage. And she's got with her a set of colleagues. And as I demo tonight, this could be your team, this could be across schools, this could be a global team. But what's happening here is social learning and professional tools blended together. So you'll see these names pop up as I move along as a way of sharing information. And we even see that some of them, like Maria, is online and she's teaching. And Todd Lamar is, these are all fictitious characters. And you could guess that this guy was named after Lamar Jackson a little bit. And we have and he's online too. And this means that we could actually text to them as we do this. And that would go, of course, to and he could text back to us. And this builds coaching right into the process. Let's go back to the home page. And we're going to use a tool called Task Builder. It was actually developed by a kindergarten teacher in her Johns Hopkins University master's program as a floppy disk in the old days, and it has evolved to a web-based tool. So I'll click it. And this is what we call the design page. Think of this as a tablet on your desk, a Word, Word file, or in Google Docs or something like that. But it's got connected to it all the resources we would want to get to write this lesson. So we have these tabs which says standards, performances, and they're all empty right now. My task is this little header, and I'll just put my name in here. And I'm just going to save this and call it adult ed demo. Oops. Saved. Okay. And what we're going to do is transfer information. Remember that graphic I showed you? We're going to start with standards. And the way we get to them is we click this, a drop-down menu comes up with these sort of databases of information. So the first question on my overview was, what do we want the students to learn? We click standards. It's going to give me some options for selections. I'm not going to spend time on that right now. I'm going to click search. And I put some samples of the CCRS reading standards, writing standards, and math standards. So I'm going to do writing tonight just for demo purposes since that cuts across areas. So if I want to look at these, the standards come up. And I have to think now of my curriculum, where I'm at, what I'm doing. And I'm going to go down here to the adult learner will write opinion pieces on topics or text supporting a point of view. And I'm going to say, this is what I want my students to learn. I may take a couple days to work on this, but that's what I want them to be able to do. I liken this to shopping on Amazon. When you go there, you go look for a book, a DVR, a rake, a shovel, and you select it and you then put it into your shopping cart. In this case, we just selected a product called Write the Standard. So we're going to go down to the bottom here and click Submit to the Task Builder design page. And it has pulled it out of the database and put it right in for the beginning of our lesson. So if I click save, I've now answered the first question. What do I want the student to learn in this lesson? If I click preview, it'll show me how I'm developing it. So each piece that I put in the lesson, it'll just add to this preview. All right, so the second question was, how do I know, or what do I want them to do to perform that standard? So I go back here, get my drop-down menu to performances, and you'll notice then that a whole bunch of new information comes up. I'm just going to pause for a second. I can't see the chat right now, so Ellen, if anything comes up and anyone wants to ask a question, please do so. These are all, this information has been gleaned from a lot of evidence-based research, from magazines, from, journals, and so forth, and put into our databases to make the process of developing a standards-based lesson very efficient, yet allow for creativity. What you're going to see happen here is you're going to actually create your own template. So I'm not taking a blank template and filling it in. I'm actually creating it with the information from this. So I'm going to go into under classroom and virtual student work and click written. And now it's saying, well, what could the kids do, or the adults, or whoever we're working with, to demonstrate that standard? It was basically writing to persuade standard. And so here I'm going to just have these options for things that they could do. And this is where differentiation starts. I think of their interests, I think of their skill base, what could they do? So I'm going to just click, I'm going to go down to script, and I'm going to get writing a script and maybe a fact sheet, okay? I'm thinking some kids could get into a script, some could do a fact sheet, students or adults. I click it, and it comes in on the next tab. All right, so whatever you call these, you might call these learning objectives, you might call them learning outcomes, you just might call them performances. You begin to just edit using the editing tools, how you want to have this thing organized. Click save. And I'm going to leave it just at this because I really don't know what I want that fact sheet to be about yet, or what I want that script to be about yet. I'm still on the journey of completing this lesson. And this approach also allows you to start wherever you want. I did a linear thing, standards, performances. You could start with the learning activities yourself. It doesn't put you into a lockstep approach to designing a lesson. Make sure I click that save. And on the preview, if we click refresh, we'll see the performances have just logged in. And so this thing is going to build as we go along. Okay, now the next thing I want is a real world setting. And now I'm differentiating again. What are the adult students' interests? What are their attitudes? What do they like? What context? I'm going to get as a template this little template for setting up your context, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, okay, diet and fitness seems to be a real popular thing right now in my classes, or maybe fashion. I could go on with as many as I need to, okay, to differentiate for the students. So when I get down in my Amazon shopping, I just shop for real world settings. I'm going to click to Task Builder. It will bring them over, pulls it out, sets it up. And so now this is where you begin to set the context. So let me just do one. I'll take the template. It says I could say you are the owner of a local fitness center. You are faced with declining enrollment because a new center moved into your service area. You must find some new services or features that you could persuade your customers to come back or to get new ones. Once you've completed your fact sheet or your script for, let's say, a script for some kind of an announcement or a Web 2.0 demo, you will, and here it is, maybe share it on the website of your company. So this template very quickly allows you to connect it to needs of interest and so forth of the students and set that. Then if you went into fashion, if you had something, you are a fashion designer trying to create something for a rock show. It just lets it go and you just put the same thing in. What's the goal or problem and how are you going to solve it? And really what you're doing here, say that, is when you go back to your performances, you're really saying, okay, now I can begin to say the students will write a fact sheet about new services for the Diet and Fitness Center. The students will write a script for a Web 2.0 demo or an interactive tool to promote the site. And that's how you start to connect and work back and forth between these tabs of information. All right, I'm going to move along. Next thing I want to go to is how are they going to learn these things? So I'm going to go, and this is where the real bulk of the in-person, virtual, and blended comes together. These are all templates that have come out of evidence-based studies. So you don't have to go to a book and kind of recreate them. They're all put into templates. And again, you're building your own template. So let me just show you how this works. Let me go down to writing. All right, so if we just did the in-person writing process, if we want the kids to go through the writing process and adults to understand how to learn those standards, we would just see in the template the pre-writing process, the drafting stage, the revising, and in each template you get to select what you want the students to do. And this is a way to take a research-based, effective teaching strategy, the writing process, and then select what you want your students to do at each stage. And what you select as you go through this instructional process, when you click submit, would go over to the design page. I don't want to go there yet. Let me go back. Now let's look at if I did that writing process virtually. I'll click. Now I can't just start with pre-writing. I have to prepare for the virtual platform. You know, am I using Zoom? Am I using Teams, Adobe Connect? Which one am I using? So let me just do this one. I'll click Zoom. Okay, what do I have to do before that session? I have to identify hosts. Okay, I might have to customize the platform setting. And now I'm going to start the lesson on Zoom. So I have to say in the pre-writing section now, what am I doing in the gallery or speaker view? Okay, and what am I going to do in the breakouts? Am I going to use a poll? And so whatever I'm clicking, it's going to be transferred. Now, these are technological, you know, that's just techie stuff. Speaker view, breakout room, polls. This is the meat. What are they going to do, you know, during that time? Are they going to gather ideas? I guess I should have left that up there. Let me take that off. All right, are they going to gather ideas and maybe identify the audience to whom they will write? Then I go down, do I want a student performance at that time, at the end of that session, so that they can share that, let's say. I can do that. I really want to use a scoring tool there too, so they know what the rubric is. Then I go to drafting. Am I going to use the gallery view, or are we just going to stay in breakout rooms? And I just continue to go through this for each one. You know, in this case, it also allows you to select materials for this piece of the process. It's just not one block for the total materials. It puts it all in context. And if I'm going to use some apps for this, I would click this one too. So let me just go down then and submit this. And so now I bring over that template, save it, and I would then edit this and, you know, what do I need to say about Zoom? Who's the hosts I have to have for this? And what platform settings do I have to customize? Then I would go in here and I would continue to edit this one. So I'll click save. Let's take a look at the preview. Whoops, don't need that one. All right, so we'll click this. And now we have the setting that we edited. We now have the learning sequence, and this one's for a virtual lesson. I did show you the in-person, and it just wouldn't have these other features. And then down in the session, or the like the phases, you would actually be talking about the gallery view and breakout rooms also. So let's go back, and let's go back to learning again. But now let's look at blended. We looked at in-person, virtual, let's look at a blended. Let's say we use the flipped classroom model. Now, in the flipped classroom, you know, the remote, they're at home or they're in some other location. What do we want done there? What digital device do you want them to use? What URLs are important? And so those are the techie types of things, but also, do you want them just to acquire information? Do you want them to do some note-taking in that process? And you would do the same thing here. You have a parent role, do you have a teacher role, student progress? And the other thing I should mention too, what I'm looking to do with many of these templates in the adult education space is to begin bringing more and more language and strategies in that are appropriate. I've just started that recently, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share what we've been doing. But I really would like ideas for adding more things in here that have the language and nuances of adult education. So that's what happens on the remote. But okay, now the classroom component, once they come together, what are you going to do there? And from here to here, all of these are research-based strategies out of the Marzano studies that show what are the high impact strategies for learning standards. And so this helps you to figure out your content and your standard and what you want them to do. Each of these, by the way, there's built-in professional learning for anyone who uses these tools. For example, at the bottom, if I don't know what the flipped classroom model is, if I click that, it's going to take me to the blended learning model universe. And here there's videos and action that describes more how that works in each of the templates. So we've tried to include that as much as possible in the actual templates. Now let me go back again to the learning options. One of the most popular models for rigorous types of training that would be consistent with the career and college ready standards would be the 5 E's model of instruction. Many of you probably are familiar with that. This is the same thing. Here's the in-person version. You click it and you just see the 5 E's, the engagement, the exploration, the explanation, extension. And what we've done with each of these is then if you go to the virtual, you click it and you see again the preparation and how you would convert it for the Zoom thing. I've noticed a trend now of folks trying to get beyond just the idea of being in a platform and trying to integrate things we knew worked in the classroom into the technology. All right, so let me go back again to learning and just show you some more things over here. If you have a learning management system like Canvas or Moodle or Schoology, like Baltimore County uses Schoology, so if you click that, you're going to get, if you wanted to use the lesson plan of setting high expectations, well, you would have to use these features. These are all Schoology features. And so if you wanted for this stage to do this, you'd click it and it would transfer over to your editor and you'd be able to use it and identify what you're going to do for the assignment. Excuse me. All right, and it just takes you through each one. But this is key to learning management systems. So we've got the evidence-based strategies all converted. We've got the blended learning models and also in the learning management systems, which can be used in a blended way. As you go through this, there's templates for differentiated activities tiered by process and readiness. You name it, it's in there. Some reading activities, writing, mathematics, science, and all these. I'll just show you a quick one, just a template with all the steps. The one I'm most proud of, actually, I should show you guys, is in mathematics. This is the teaching for understanding in mathematics. And the 3 countries that score the highest in mathematics around the world use this approach. And the boldface, the activity, is what the research says you do when you teach mathematics in a rigorous kind of way. And then you can enter your steps as to how you're going to implement that research finding and select the strategies in here that you want to use. And none of these in the higher order mathematics start with doing drills. Even for students who are struggling with mathematics, it's more of a problem-oriented, problem-solution, collaborative approach. And so this is an example of taking research and then making it practical for the day-to-day work of a teacher. And this one also shows you the sources for that. Let me go back to, on this side of the learning strategies are some graphic organizers you could use, and they're here. You can use these and make them print from there, type your instructions. You can grab these and pull them off and put them into an LMS and so forth and use them that way. But so there's a whole area of graphic organizers. These are checking for student progress. Here's a timeout, repeat. This is just kind of a check for understanding that you could put together. And the templates just go on and on and on. Okay, and then there's some actual examples of test items that have been used in state and local exams, that if you wanted to do an exit ticket, if you wanted to start over, not with a lesson, just go into Task Builder and just do an exit ticket, you could come up like, here's a constructed response for reading. And this is the format that's used on a state assessment. And it might be, when I watched a session this morning in the Institute about CASAS and TABE and others, they all have formats for testing that if you want to align your instruction with them, you can go in and find the templates. And this would be something that I'd really want to update in this for any users. All right, so that's the learning content. And let's go to scoring. So we now know, let me go back here, I guess, to refresh. So we now know the standard, it's a writing standard. We know what performances they're going to do. And I would go back and edit this, of course. We know the 2 real world settings that might happen. And this is the virtual approach that I did. You can also, in this, in the design page, you can go to any of these, like the learning, and click on source, and you'll get the HTML code that if you're working on an LMS, you can capture this and paste it right into a blog or any kind of digital tool online and bring it up in that way also. Or you can take that into like a Google Classroom thing and also paste it up. So the next step is really, now let's see how they're doing. We'll go to scoring. And these are sample rubrics for scoring the script or the fact sheet that those students are going to write. And this was basically a scoring rubric, writing to persuade, because they had to convince somebody, I believe, from the standard. And it's going to bring up a scoring rubric. And this is an analytic rubric because it can be scored from pieces of writing. You can also use this as a primary trait rubric and only score one part of it. Low performing schools that I worked with, especially in Baltimore, really the kids had trouble developing their initial position and so forth, and they really worked on this school-wide, and it made all the difference in the world. They didn't worry about the rest of the rubric. They went for a period of just focusing on it from a primary trait point of view. So again, you'd shop for the rubric, you submit it over there. Probably don't need this. And save it. And we now have our scoring tool, and we really want kids to get up to that 3 level. You can edit this and call this dynamic if you want to, or proficient or whatever. And that's the value of these. You can also say, you can change the writer to, the student or whatever you want to call it. And then once you do these, you can save those as your personal rubrics in your task order. Save that. So now we have in our lesson, refresh, standards, performances, the real world setting, the learning, and now we have our scoring tool. And now we go to the big one, and that is, did it work? So we go into, well, let me just go back to rubrics for a minute, our scoring. So these are a bunch of sample rubrics. A lot of them come from validated state assessments, and some of them from test scores in Maryland and New Jersey, as I said, where I've worked with LearningFRONT in this tool. We basically put those materials in through pilot studies and so forth, and that's how this has grown over time. And the other thing I wanted to mention, I've not been saying anything about it. In each of these databases, you'll see user tips. So if you don't know much about scoring tools, it's going to give you some background on it and explain what they are and how they work. So that's sort of the built-in professional learning for each of these template bases. Let's go down to results. And in results, we have a plan for instructional improvement. And this is what makes the difference. There's 2 ways to play darts. The first way is to throw the darts at the wall and then put the target up. The second way is to put the target up and throw the darts. Well, this says, let's put the target up. We know what the standards are. We know how we're going to teach it. We know how we're going to score it. So if you click this template, You can put your students' names in, or you can correlate this with some other testing systems or data systems that you have. You can break it out in whatever student groups you want to. This has a template. This is editable. And this basically, these instructions up here basically say, put your student's name in, put the score that they achieved, and then for as many as you have, how many are at the dynamic or 3-level proficient and basic. And for that lesson that you taught, you'll now have a breakout of how the students are doing. But that's the data. So how do you visualize it? So what trends did you see in that lesson? What contributing factors? If it's a virtual lesson, a contributing factor would be the quality of the technology the students are using. You know, the disturbances in the background and so all that would come into play on the results. And then this is a real powerful one here where you reflect on your data. As I relate my student results, my lesson strategies, I noticed that you enter a strategy, pre-writing had the most influence, or maybe drafting had the most influence. What had the least influence and what has some promise. And so you can select these, or you can also use some of these sentence starters. And these are samples of teachers who have done this in the past if you want to see how to analyze a lesson. And then you can also build a plan for next steps, an action plan for teaching the lesson again. And if you want to evaluate your own lesson, there's a rubric for evaluating a lesson. But I just click those boxes. I'm going to click submit, and it's going to put that into my lesson area. And this can be deleted after you read the instructions and do that for your students. So we go back here, the task preview, refresh. And so now we have the total lesson put together. I think I'm at 633 right now. Let's go back over. So we have our standards, which was basically write opinion pieces, points of view, so a little bit of persuasion in there. And the 2 performances, the context, the learning strategy, and this would change based on what templates I use for in-person or blended. The scoring tool, that would be the same for whatever type of lesson that you would use, and the results section would be the same. I'm not saying in this process to do this every day. What we've seen work over time for improvement is to do this maybe once every 2 weeks with a lesson on a particular standard, just reteach the standard and to see what improvements you're making by the analyses that you do. The third learning objective for this session tonight was to reverse declining student achievement, and that's how you do it, by looking at the strategies you're using for the students. And I'm going to just stop right here and see if anyone can, Ellen, if you have any comments, anybody wants to stop and ask me any questions about what we've done so far.
I don't see any questions in the chat box right now, but actually Tori asks, how long have you been using this tool? So maybe you could speak to a little bit of who's been using this tool, how they've been using this tool.
Yeah, it started as a floppy disk. It was developed, as I said, by a kindergarten teacher at Hopkins. And it was used by about 75 schools in Baltimore City schools when the performance-based testing started in Maryland, and evolved in the year about 2000. It evolved into a web-based tool. And then it was used by teachers and teacher trainers in about 3 or 4 states. And then it evolved, it was placed into this whole learning environment so that you could merge social learning and communication, which I'm going to get into here a little bit. So it's got a lot of work done there. It's also been used by in a project with the Center for Disease Control, where it was a part of developing action plans for wellness programs in industry. And so the editor was customized for that. In other words, all this content, all this can be customized for a setting, school, business, college, and so forth. Even when I did the standards, when I click this, I did adult student standards, but there's also standards for professional standards. You know, if you were training teachers, you'd want them to do these standards, which I found on the web. And in all these, we try to put the source right here as to where they come from. So it's been used in teacher training also. I teach for Loyola University as an adjunct professor, and it was used by a lot of teachers, principals who had to train teachers on how to do this thing in schools. And the adult education world space is really what I want to continue developing. Now let's just talk about sharing a little. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any others, Ellen?
No, no other questions at this time.
Okay. Let's talk about sharing now. Let's go back to Task Builder, and it's still here. If I wanted to share this now with my team, I could click clone, and my team's going to come up. Those are those colleagues I mentioned when we started. And so let's do Trailblazer, Patrick. And what we're going to do is clone it. And what's going to happen is what I just developed is going to just shift to his editor so that he has a copy of it to work on. I'll just click clone, it'll verify it. And so this lesson is now in his task folder. When you hit task folder, you see this is the AE demo I just did. Here's some other lessons that Sally, our fictitious member, has. And you see clone title. So in who she just cloned it to, Patrick, it's going to show up here, coming from a colleague. And he'll be able to open it from there. And then wiki tasks, if you take a lesson that you've developed and you want to post it so the entire community in your LearningFRONT can see it or access it, then you can do that also. Now, in this case, Sally Stone has a lesson called The Humpback Whale, Streaming the News, but she didn't develop that. She went and got a copy of it. It's called a wiki, and then she just cloned it to herself. So she has her own version, and she has the one that was submitted by another colleague. And the way that works is over here on Wiki Tasks. You click that, and let's just say I wanted to do one. I want to search for some lessons that have been posted in writing. So I click writing and I do search. Okay, so there's some lessons by other members of the community. And once I know that I like this lesson, here's a lesson on innovation versus tradition in education. So this is back in 17, and she did that persuasive writing in high school. So she was using the Maryland Core Learning Goals, and there's her lesson. Performances, write website called a wiki. It's an educational setting. You're putting a role of a principal. Here's her learning. She's using the writing process. She actually used it there too. So if I like that, I can go back here and click this. And when I come down here, I'll add the task folder, and you'll notice that it's just been added right here. So I now have access to it to make comments on Janine, I guess it was, on hers. But if I want my own, I click clone, and I just clone it. And I now have my own version right here. So that's the power of technology and sharing. If I were a program director and there were a new set of standards came out, or standards we wanted to improve in college and career writer standards, I could just start all over here with a new task. I could click start a new task. And I could come in here and just select the standards and save it, and then share the standards with my staff and say, what are your ideas for achieving these standards? Then they could bring it up in their editor and do it. So the whole thing's integrated. You don't have to go to other programs. You don't have to upload, download PDFs or use other kinds of tools. If you wanted to, you could send this. Let me go back to the task folder. I'll go to that demo we were doing. If I want to send that through email, I would have to put the colleagues that I want to put on here, and then you'll see it's already attached. And I'll just write my message here and click submit, and then that would email as an HTML file to whoever I want to email it to. So I have within the community being able to share and edit things and in a very powerful way, and then also to send outside the community a version of it. When I worked in the State Department in Maryland, we developed standards all the time, and this didn't exist. And we had to, fax things out. We could have just posted from the state level a set of standards and asked the instructional leaders in each county, send us your ideas on those right through this editor, and it would be in real time. You can, however, if you want a copy of this, once it's here in the preview, you can use your browser tools to print, and you can do this as a PDF file and get it out of there if you want that kind of access. Okay, and then let's see, the sharing.
Nick, there's a couple questions about the rubrics. Would you like to address
Sure.
them now? Someone asked, are the rubrics customizable?
Oh, yes, good question. Let's go back to content, scoring. These are like, this is a key. This is a third grade science experiment, and it's just key to what happens in that experiment. It's not quite a rubric. Rubric is the same. Rubric will work in any setting, like persuasive writing will work in the business world. It'll work at home. It'll work in school. But this is a science experiment. So if I submitted this to the design page, I can go in there now, and well, it probably went in under the first one. Yeah, there it is. So I can go in here and edit that any way I want. Okay, I can rename it. I'll go back and do another one. So there are keys, there are rubrics, and there's also a, let's see, it should be in here. Yeah, a template. And this is just, enter your score point, and then you develop your own that just give you some instructions as to what to include. So this is just a pure template here. The other ones are actual examples. And these come from testing programs in Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and some other areas. And this is what I was looking at some rubrics for adult education before this, and I didn't quite get one. I didn't have enough time to figure out how to put it in there. So I really would like some feedback on how to do that and add it to this.
So Nick, if a local program created an assessment or created a rubric, then they could share it amongst themselves, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You could actually, you could go back to the design page and start over to start a new task. And your task now would be a rubric template. So you'd rename it, and you could just go in here and you could actually wipe this out, take the table thing out of there, and then just go in and start with the table, and create your own rubric, and then save it as a rubric, not a lesson. And then you'd be able to clone it to anybody or send it to anybody from a sharing point of view. And you could do that with any one of these things. And even when you finish a lesson, like, this is a finished lesson, this humpback whale, let me bring that up. So this is a finished lesson with a little bit of cosmetic stuff put on it to make it look good, color background, all from this rich text editor. And I'll preview that. So this is a reading, writing, connection standards. This one, they're writing a newscast script, and the kids are producing, this is a third grade class, they're producing a video recording of their newscast. So they're going to read some books about the humpback whale, and they're going to create a newscast and do it that way. And this goes into actually the smart skills involved. I didn't demo that piece, and the preferences that they want to do for the lesson. And then this is a Zoom and digital learning platform. So this is Zoom and like Schoology together. And you can see an example of that. That's available in the Wikitask search, that thing I did right here. You could find that lesson and use it. Just a ton of stuff. I'm not going to be able to demo it all here. Let's see, we're at 6:45, and I wanted to do some sharing there. I'm going to go back to, I actually want to log out, and I want to go back to, I think it was the coach one that was cloned. Let's see where he is. There he is. All right, so we go in here. Remember, I cloned Sally's demo that I did with you guys. So if I go into Task Builder, he gets an alert. Alert, you have a new clone. So anytime he goes in there, he goes into his task folder, and down here, there's the demo. So he clicks it, and it's now in his editor, and that's how fast it would go back and forth to anyone using it. I just wanted to demo that part of it. And go out of there, go back to Sally. Where are you? There you go. All right, and there's also sharing, and the other part of my objectives for this was in sharing. In a learning community, you can have real-time contact. Like syzygy is our term for aligning people and communities. And it really it's based on philosophy and astronomy, aligning the planets. Well, we're trying to align people and tools. So you can write a message in here, you can add a URL, and then it shows up, and you can share in real time information. You can click, look at STEM resources like he's sharing that, and that gives it a real-time feel right out of your learning community. And these would be messages about coaching sessions. Again, it's professional tools and it's social learning tools integrated as you work through it. All right, we're at 6:47. Let me think if there's anything. Another thing you'd want to build into is coaching. You have some tools for coaching, like Sally's actually doing some coaching. So she's posting her sessions, and that then goes into the messaging system when that's done. And whoever she wants to coach with, you'd get a message back here setting up the time for it. And the coaching thing is a real powerful one. When I work with teachers, they'll share something, and now with Zoom and other tools, you can put it up on the screen and just go back and forth in a coaching session and edit in real time. And that's really a powerful approach for learning. And I guess if you have learning programs too, under this tool, the programs, you can actually put e-learning programs on different topics. This data-driven, this one right here is one I'm working on right now. And it's one I'm gonna, it teaches all the things I was showing to you tonight very quickly. It teaches it in a sustained way over an 8-week span, involves 3 webinars and a lot of sharing of lessons that are tried in the classrooms, and it's done in a cohort of 12 people. But again, other learning management systems also have the same options to put programming up. This one is totally dedicated, LearningFRONT, to teaching and learning. Let me go back here. All right, I'm going to go out of the tool and back to my agenda for a minute. Let me do a stop share here. Share. Okay, so in refreshing, what I did was took you to standards and selected them using my Amazon shopping analogy, found the performances for that standard, the real world setting, the learning strategies, the scoring tool, results. And I didn't really get a chance to show you these other ones, but they're there. And in this whole process, that last section, the results, takes you through this because it allows you to plan it, teach it, check it, and then act on it, looking at your data, not only about you, but also about your students and how those work back and forth. Okay, with what I mean. So what are some follow-up actions that might be possible? If you're interested, there's a 30-day free membership that you could go in and use the tool as it is now. If you're interested in doing that and making suggestions, I'd love to work with you. I will offer a free coaching session, 15-minute coaching session on anything that you might be excited about for LearningFRONT to add to it. There is a the infographic on dynamic teaching and learning is available here. And I think Ellen's going to put that link in the chat for anybody to look at. And if you're interested in contacting me, feel free to email me at any time. And once you become, if you do try the 30-day free membership, once I see that you've logged on, I'll ask you to become a colleague. Actually, that's one thing I didn't do. Let me stop sharing here. Go back here. Once you become a member of a community, you can then you can search for, find members, and then you become colleagues. And then on your list, you would be added to this and would be able to communicate and send messages back and forth and share resources or give feedback on lessons and so forth. Okay. And the other, I just have a few minutes here and I really should have done this. Let me go back to Task Builder. If I were to go into start over, new task, A task is a lesson, an assessment, a data display, a scoring rubric. These are all different tasks of teaching. That's why we call it task builder. If I start over and I wanted to sit down with a group and just think about a lesson and how it might be designed, I can go to preferences. And preferences is like sort of when you go in the pizza shop and they say, what do you want? You expose your preferences, right? I want a deep dish. I want pepperoni. I want pineapples, whatever. You're expressing your preferences. Well, what if you just wanted to sit down and think about what are your preferences for a lesson? You know, what's the learning model? This is just like a checklist of learning, you know, in a physical classroom, in a virtual learning model, and a blended. So it helps you think through options. How are you going to engage the students? And here's just a list of ways you can do that: online, blended, or face-to-face. And it helps to think about ways to do that. So whatever you click, it's going to show up in the editor, and you can then expound on how you want to do it. You know, how do you want to differentiate instruction? All of these things take what's in the literature, put it in the hands of teachers at your fingertips, and lets you just put it in your editor and start thinking about it in a very quick way. Differentiating by content, process, and product, readiness. What strategies for differentiation do you want to use? And if you don't know these, you know, it's easy just to if you don't know what cubing is, just copy it and go to DuckDuckGo or Google and find out more information about it and then come back to it. Special ed accommodations, use of resources. What's the school going to provide? What's the student going to provide? Who's the customer for student work? You know, do you want them to do peers? You want them to go out to community members? And it's just a series of things that go into lessons. Ellen and I were talking about how sophisticated education and standards can be. Well, it goes way beyond that for effective instruction. And it's not that you would do this every day, but it's a nice place to think about different lessons. So one task could be just a preference template, and that could be shared as a part of your program for others to follow. And then the other one that I didn't show was SMART skills. And this is, and I found in low performing schools, especially if you would take all the lessons in the school and make 3 piles of the lessons, how many of those lessons stopped at kids just acquiring data? How many of those lessons stopped at acquiring data and visualizing it somehow, putting it into some format? And how many lessons went actually to creating knowledge where kids and adults have to make decisions, solve problems, or create solutions? And the schools that did better got more lessons up to that 3rd level. If you use Bloom's taxonomy and so forth, you know, that was developed in 1956. It's been used for a long time, but it didn't seem to make a difference in schools. And we said, let's really hone this down to what works. And so this helps you to think about that for a lesson also. And then the last one I didn't show was metacognition. And this is, you probably would use this template and put it into some kind of Google form or something, so each student could answer it, you know, at the cognitive level. I will collect the following information, and, you know, what skills you're a student. Describe what skills you needed to complete this test. Explain how you solved the problem. This is where you really learn about the kids. You get into their heads, or the adults, and you keep continuing to get into more insightful information. You know, how did you feel about this? Was it useful? Self-efficacy, and so forth. And this moves you more and more to the social emotional side of things and preferences, and helps you to really understand how to adjust your lesson for the next time around. Okay, we're at 6:55. Let me go back, stop share. I think that's about what I have. If anyone, I can see the chat now. Okay, one question, what is the fee for this? The fee's $9.97 a month for that tool. And I've done customized versions of the whole site. We customized one from some colleges, and also for CDC when we did the workplace wellness. So you can see those on that link that I provided. You can see more information. Just go to learningfront.com on that. See what else is on here. Yeah, the collaborating on lessons from Ellen. Yeah, that's the part that's Okay.
Yeah, so Nick, I think we hit most of the questions in the chat box, but
Okay.
I have one additional question. When you talk to the actual teachers who have used the program, what would you say that they think is the biggest benefit? Because there's certainly many different aspects that the system can help with, but is there one overarching feeling that you get from instructors?
Quick access to the resources, the efficiency, time-saving tool. We designed this task builder tool originally so that teachers in schools could write a lesson in their planning period. They didn't have to do it at home. And they told us that it was always finding the standards, or deciding what was in there. And so that has evolved over time from just the efficiency now to sharing through those methods I showed, lessons that work, not just sharing a lesson, period. You had to put the results in and say, yeah, this worked, and this is why it worked. And that's what makes the difference.
Well, thank you so much. I think you've given everyone a lot to think about, and I do highly encourage all of you to take advantage of what Nick has offered.